So, before starting the next concept, let's have a quick preview of what all we have learned so far, right? So, the first thing that we understood was the undecidability proof for ATM. So, we understood that ATM is undecidable. And to prove this, what we did, to prove this, we used a method called diagonalization, right? And that was very similar to how we have proved that real numbers are uncountable. Okay, after that, once we learned that ATM is undecidable, before that, we also talked that there are few languages which are decidable. So, for example, ADFA, we talked about EDFA, then we talked about EQDFA. Similarly, we had ACFG and ECFG. There was also ANFA. There was AREX also. So all these languages were actually proven to be decidable. And then we are proving that we proved that ATM is undecidable, and it was the first language that was uh, proved to be undecidable. After that, we further took the problem ETM, EQTM. Then we also considered uh, regular TM, yeah, and halt TM. And we proved that all these are actually undecidable. And we used reduction method, right? So in today's class, we're gonna actually talk about reduction in a formal way. So we're gonna formalize what do we mean by reduction. And so far what we were doing, whenever we say that, okay, this ATM is reducible or to some problem A, right? So then what we were saying, we were assuming that if you have a decider for A, we tried to prove that using the decider for A, you can construct a decider for this ATM, right? That was our main principle. That using the decider for A, you should be able to construct a decider for ATM. Whenever I say decider, it is like you have a Turing machine which decides for this infinite amount of time always on any input. You give any string from sigma star, it will decide whether that string is part of A or not. So that is decider for A. And using that, you can decide for ATM, you can build a decider. But we know that there cannot exist a decider for ATM, so we were claiming that there cannot exist a decider for A also. So this assumption is incorrect. So this construction using decider for A to construct a decider for ATM, that used to establish this reduction relationship. Today we're gonna formalize it and we're gonna put a more formal way of defining this reduction. So it is called mapping reducibility. So what is mapping reducibility? We'll come to that. Before that, let us understand what is a computable function. We started with, if you remember, we started with computable function. So now is the time to define what is a computable function. So the definition is that if there is a function f going from sigma star to sigma star, right? So it is called computable function if there exists some Turing machine that on every input w, right, that if you on every input w, what it does, it halts. The most important thing is it halts with fw on its tape. Now try to understand what is given here. It says that a function is computable if you have a Turing machine that can actually compute that function altogether, right? That's what it is saying. But what does it mean by computing that function? It means that in the beginning, when you start, you have W and your header is here. From here, in few steps after running the Turing machine, you should be having exactly FW on the tape. So if you have a Turing machine that can do transformation for every W to FW, then that is a computable function. And the most important thing is that on every input W, it halts. That is very important. It doesn't mean that it goes in loop. So it's a kind of decider, but it doesn't just say Q accept, Q reject. Definitely it says Q accept, and by the time it says Q accept, it has already modified the content of the input tape in FW. Is it clear? The computable function? Or is there any doubt in that? So computable function means there exists some decided Turing machine for it that halts in finite amount of time for sure, and when it halts, actually it, by the time it halts, it has already converted your W into FW. Okay. So there is one example given. For example, if you want to convert, there is a Turing machine M and you want to transform it into M dash, right? So this is a description, this is another description. The difference between these Turing machines is that L of M is actually equals to L of M dash, but M, right, M has infinite tape while M dash has semi-infinite tape. What do we mean by infinite tape? So both side you have blanks, right, apart from the input. But when you say semi-infinite tape, there one side there is a restriction, your input is given here, and only one side you have blanks. So one machine that works on this type of tape is M, one machine that works on this type of tape is M dash, although the language is same, but given a Turing machine of M type, always you should have a computable function that can convert to M dash. Is it possible? The answer is yes. You can have such a computable function, and that is actually a Turing machine that can convert this M into M dash always. How it will do? We will not go in the details, but it will be very simple, right? See here, whenever you try to move in the left hand side, it is not possible on this particular one, right? So moving in the left hand side means converting some blank symbol into a non-blank symbol. That will be equivalent to actually shifting this whole content one cell into right, and then refilling this with something new. So this m dash will be very similar to m, just it will have so many extra states there to shift it. Whenever you want to move your head left to the leftmost valid symbol before going to the blank, on the m dash you should be actually shifting everything and then writing here with something whatever you might have done for m for converting blank into some character. So these transformation of descriptions, it is again a computable function. We were talking about transformations, right? If you remember, taking a non-deterministic Turing machine, converting into a deterministic Turing machine. We also talked about taking a Turing machine and then further modifying its altogether functionality, restricted to run on some input, restricted to run on some not on all inputs. It is just that we are adding more states or something to really modify that machine, and this modification is a computable function. That is why, if you remember, whenever we were saying that modify this machine or something like that, this modification is always a computable function. And computable function means that it is a type of decider only, that you halt definitely in finite amount of time and you are able to convert the machine into the next one. Okay. So let us now define. So I hope you are very clear with what is a computable function, right? Now let us define mapping reducibility. So this particular mapping reducibility is a very important concept, and this we're gonna use not just for this chapter but for the all upcoming concepts that you're gonna learn. So try to understand it very clearly. So we say that a language A is mapping reducible to a language B. See, in the reduction we are writing M. This M denotes that it is mapping reducible. By mapping reducible, we say that a language A is mapping reducible to another language B if there exists a computable function f. Again, f is a function from sigma star to sigma star, such that for every w, where w belongs to A, f of w belongs to B. Right? Then this f is called reduction from A to B. So mapping reducibility, that a language is mapping reducible to another language if there exists a function f, computable function, such that if w belongs to A, so the computed value for w belongs to B. And it is if and only if, right? So you have to understand that. What do you mean by if and only if? That if w belongs to A, then fw belongs to B. If w does not belongs to A, then fw also does not belongs to B. So if that kind of relationship exists for a computable function, then A is mapping reducible to B, and then f is called as a reduction from A to B. Is it clear? Now, if you see this, let us try to understand what this all means. So, we are saying that whenever you write A is mapping reducible to B, there exists a function f which is which is computable function, and whenever w belongs to A, so basically w belongs to A if and only if f of w belongs to B. What does it mean? This means that this checking whether w belongs to A, now this problem is equivalent to checking whether the function mapping of this w belongs to B, this equivalent problem. So this problem, this question mark, if you say w belongs to A, that is a question, and fw belongs to B. These are two different questions. This question is actually a membership problem for language A. And this problem is a membership problem for language B. Right? Okay, there is a question. So the cardinal A and B will be equal. What do you think? When you say that there is this language A, there is this language B, and you have a mapping from A to B. What do you mean? Does it mean that the cardinality of A and B are same? It's a very important question. Good that Dhruv actually asked it. What do you mean by it? I hope you all know about mapping. So when you say there is a mapping from A to B, there is a computable function from A to B, this exists. What does it mean? What does it mean this? Okay, Anmol is saying not necessarily. See, good, we have another no. Mapping just ensures that whenever you're gonna pick some element here, it will be mapped to a element here for sure. Whenever you have an element here, it is going to be mapped. Whenever you take any element outside of this, it cannot be mapped to any element here. Can it? So if any element is outside of A, can it be mapped to some element in B? The answer is no. Why? Because there is a if and only if relationship. If and only means it has two components. One is if W belongs to A, then FW belongs to B. If W is not in A, then FW is not in B. Right? So, this mapping will only ensure, as many of you have rightly understood, that until the mapping is a bijective, right? Until you have one-to-one and onto both relationships, you cannot ensure that the cardinality is same. So there may be some other problems here which are not mapping of, there may be some other Basically, there may be some other strings here which are part of B, which are not mapping off any element from A. It is very much possible. So I hope you understood. And understanding this is very important because we're going to use this. And many of you might not be able to follow if you don't understand this particular mapping thing, that when you are having this relationship, that whenever W is part of A, then FW is part of B. It is altogether what I wanted to convey, that there was one membership problem, right, for language A, and we are able to convert this problem into a membership problem for B. That's what reduction helps us. So whenever you have a computable function like this, which ensures this particular thing, this relationship, it means that you have a way to convert your membership problem for A into a membership problem for B. So if equality holds, then A reducible to B and B reducible to A, hence A is equivalent to B. Yes. That is again a very important fact, that if you are able to make sure that it is one to one and on to, that means these two problems are actually same problem, isn't it? They have same number of instances, and solving one problem will give solution to other problem. Because now if FW belongs to B, you have the same number of problems here, but and yes, you know that when you have a one to one and on to function, then only the function is reversible. So a mapping is reversible when? I think you should go back to that concept and just try to revise that. Then you will have the answer altogether, that if A is reducible to B, so whether B is reducible to A or not. Because to establish B is reducible to A, you have to see if you can actually reverse the mapping function, or you can find a different function. So it may be possible, it all depends on that. To prove that A is reducible to B, you have to find a mapping, a function that establishes this relationship. Okay, so altogether this reduction helps us convert a membership problem into another membership problem. So if we have a solution to the membership problem for B, we can use it to membership problem for A. Is it clear how we can use it? Because you have established this relationship. So this reduction helps you establish a relationship between two problems, such that if you have a solution to the second problem, you will be able to use this reduction to convert this first problem into the second problem, and you can solve it. Right? So there is a theorem. Let us quickly jump to that, and that's a very much being derived from what we just understood. It says that the theorem, that if A is mapping reducible to B, yes, Abhijit, what we were saying, that some elements in B which are not mapped, it may be possible. See, that's what we are saying. When you establish that there is a mapping from A to B, you are just ensuring that whenever you pick an element from A, it is mapped to some element in B. It may be two elements of A can be mapped to same element, right? Or there may be, until you ensure that it's a onto mapping, you cannot ensure anything, right? That whether there are some elements in B left out which are not mapped. So altogether we are just saying it's a mapping. We are not saying which kind of mapping. Any type of mapping it can be. Is it clear? Okay. So the theorem says that if A is mapping reducible to B and B is decidable, then A is also decidable. So what does it say? If you can establish that A is mapping reducible to B and B is a decidable membership problem, then A is also decidable. So if B language is decidable, what does it mean by B is decidable? That means there is a Turing machine that decides for it. That means in finite amount of time it can solve the set membership problem for B. So if you have such a Turing machine for B, you can use it to build a Turing machine for A. That's what we were doing. But this construction will happen in finite amount of time. Now, to prove that, let's understand the proof of this. It's very trivial, by the way. Let's say that let M be the decider for M be the decider for B. And let's say that F is a function from sigma star to sigma star such that you have this, that whenever W belongs to A, then you have F of W belongs to B and vice versa. So these two things are given to you, right? So M be the decider for B and there is a computable function, most important. Computable means there exists some Turing machine that can compute it. So what you're going to do? I'm going to construct a decider for my language A. How we going to do that? This decider will look like the following. So on input W, W is the input. You want to check whether W is part of A or not. What you going to do in this decider? You're going to say compute FW. Now compute FW. Because F is a computable function, you have a Turing machine that can compute it in finite amount of time and it will be able to halt with FW on its state. So you can pass in this W to that particular Turing machine that can compute that function F and it will compute FW and leave it on its state. Once you are done computing FW and because it is a finite amount of time, then you can pass in this FW to your decider for B. So you're gonna just plainly run M on input FW and output whatever M outputs. Simple. Now, you have to verify whether this N is a decider for A or not. How are we going to verify? See, you are running M on input FW. If M says accept, if M accepts FW, what does it mean? M accepts FW, it means that FW is part of B, correct? Because M is a decider for B. So if M is accepting FW, that means FW is part of B. And FW is part of B because F is such kind of relationship, right? It is actually establishing A is mapping reducible to B. It will help you say that if FW is part of B, then W is part of A. W belongs to A. And if W belongs to A, that means N accepts W. And that's what. Whenever M accepts, N also accepts. That's what you are saying, right? You're going to output the decision of M as a decision of N. When M says doesn't accept, right, FW, what is going to happen? That means FW is not part of B, because M is a decider. When M says doesn't accept FW, that means FW is not member of B. And if FW is not member of B, because of this relationship, if and only, and this function, this W is not member of B. And whenever W is not member of B, your N says doesn't accept W. Now, when M says accept FW, N says doesn't accept W. And if you see just this much component, whenever W is part of A, N accepts W. Whenever W is part of B, N doesn't accept W. So it's a valid decider for A. Sorry, this is A. It's a valid decider for A. And how much time does it take? Computing FW, finite amount of time. Running M on FW, it's a decider, again finite amount of time. So altogether, N takes the right decision to check whether a string is part of A or not, and it does decide in finite amount of time always. So therefore, N is a decider for A. So whenever you have a decider for B, I can construct a decider for A, provided that you have this relationship holding there. Is it clear? Or is there any doubt? Good. Okay. Let's take a small corollary result from the same theorem. So what does this corollary says? It says that if A is mapping reducible to B and A is undecidable, then B is undecidable. We don't need to prove it. It is just extension of the result that you have achieved here. That if this mapping reducibility is existing and B is decidable, then A is decidable. So whenever you have that A is undecidable, for sure B is undecidable. Why? Anyone? Can you tell me why? It's very trivial, by the way. So you have to see that if A is mapping reducible to B, and suppose that A is undecidable, these two facts, and it says that B is undecidable. Yes, something like that. But you can actually comment in the following way that, see, whenever you have these two things already given, and A is undecidable means that A is a problem and you have A is a membership problem which is you cannot solve, and you have a relationship mapping from A to B. Then B has to be undecidable by default, because if you take the contradiction assumption that B is decidable, Whenever B is decidable and this is given, by default A becomes decidable. So A is undecidable, it has to be ensured from that B is undecidable. So these two statements you have to understand very carefully, because these will help us build even more stronger statements, and always similar kind of statements will be used. So whenever you have a reduction, so if you want to prove that the left hand side is decidable, you have to find a decider for the right hand side. But if you want to prove that the left hand side, sorry, the right hand side is undecidable, to prove that you have to prove that the left hand side is undecidable. Because if you have proved this reduction, that means A is very hard problem and it is reducible to a problem B. So B has to be equally hard, because if B is not equally hard to solve, you can always use the solution of B to construct a solution for A, right? So B has to be at least harder than what A is. I think what Shubham wanted to say, what others are, it is something like the same, that whenever you establish that A is mapping reducible to B, it ensures that B is as hard as A to solve. Whenever you have a solution to B, you can construct a solution to A. But when you have a solution to A, okay, let me write a statement and ask your comment. I think that will be interesting. So if A is mapping reducible to B and A is decidable, right? A is decidable given, then what can you say about B? Question. Tell me. If A is mapping reducible to B and A is decidable, then what can you say about B? Very good. That means you guys are really listening and understanding. That's very right answer. You cannot say anything about, right? A is a simpler problem and it is mapping reducible to a B problem. So B is as hard as A, but B can be much harder, right? So that is why you have to, whenever we are saying that if A is mapping reducible to B and B is decidable. So if B is solvable, certainly A is solvable because B is as hard as A. When you get this, that A is mapping reducible to B, again it just says B is as difficult to solve as A, then when A is unsolvable, certainly B cannot be solvable because B is as hard as A. Yeah, a subset of B is decidable and all, but altogether you cannot comment about the overall B. Okay, good. Really, at least I'm happy that you guys are understanding. Okay, let's go further and try to see that when we proved that this halt TM is undecidable, let's revisit the proof but using the mapping reducibility, right? So we're gonna prove that ATM is mapping reducible to halt TM. To prove that, what we need to prove? To prove that, we have to establish that there is a computable function f, right, from sigma star to sigma star, such that whenever MW, this is the input format for ATM, right? So whenever a machine and W is part of ATM, right, then it is if and only if you can convert this. So there is a conversion from here to here as F that converts this input into another machine M dash and another string W dash, which is for halt TM. Right. So I have to prove that there is a function f I can define that takes MW as an input and it computes M dash W dash. So I have such a function and it has to be ensured that that function is still establishes this relationship, that whenever that MW is member of ATM, the corresponding M dash W dash is member of a halt TM, and whenever MW is not member of ATM, M dash W dash is not member of halt TM. So the function, this conversion, first of all, the function has to be computable and it has to be make sure that this kind of relationship is established. Okay. So let's define that function f. So what f does on input MW is it does the following. First step, it constructs M dash as follow. M dash, this machine on input X, any input X, first of all, it run M on X. Step 2, if M accepts, you're gonna accept for M dash also. If M rejects, enter a loop. And it also sets W dash equals to W, and then it says that output M dash W dash. So W and W dash are actually same, no changes to it. Only the machine M is converted to M dash. Now this is the function. First of all, you have to check whether it's a computable function or not. Right. So the answer is yes, because you are constructing a machine, you are transforming a machine, and that transformation is very simple. So this machine is certainly a computable function. Now the next step is, and yes, one thing is clear. If you want to see the language of M dash and M, what is the difference? Whenever M is accepting a string, M dash also accepts. Right? When M is rejecting a string, what happens? M dash goes in a loop. And when M is going in a loop, what is happening? Can you guess? When M goes in loop on X, what happens for M dash? M dash also goes in loop, right? Yes or no? Okay. So all together, let's just understand that whenever M says accept, it means M dash also says accept. When M says reject, M dash says loop. When M says loop, actually M never says loop, but assume that when M goes in loop, M dash also goes in loop. Right? Now if you want to club here, whenever M accepts, M dash accepts. When M rejects or M doesn't accept, what happens? M dash goes in loop. By doing this, what we are establishing, if you are able to get that, you got the construction of F. Whenever M accepts, M dash also accepts. When M doesn't accept, dash goes in loop. It is just ensuring that whenever M is accepting a string, what is happening? M dash is also accepting that string. Right? M dash accepting means M dash is actually halting on that string. Here M dash accept means what? M dash is halting for the haltium, right? And because it is accepting, so it is definitely going to halt. So M accepts a string, it is part of ATM. Then M dash is accepting a string, it is part of haltium, because without halting you cannot accept. But when M is not member of, right, M is not accepting a string, that means M is not accepting a string. That means what? When you take this, when you take a string such that MW is not part of ATM, then what is going to happen? When you take M dash W, that goes in loop, and therefore it can never be part of haltium. So it is ensured by this function. This function that you have computed, it is constructed M into M dash in a way that whenever M accepts, it accepts, but whenever M rejects the input, it goes in a loop for M dash. And that makes sure that whenever M is accepting an input, so that pair will be in ATM, so the corresponding pair is also in haltium. But whenever M is not accepting, it forces M dash to go in loop, and then M dash will also be not in the haltium with that particular input string. Is it clear? So this construction, it's a computable function, and it is enforcing this condition that whenever MW is part of ATM, then M dash W dash is part of haltium. When MW is not part of ATM, M dash is not part of haltium. It is enforcing that. Is it clear? So because you are able to find such a function that enforces this condition, that means this mapping reducibility is holding. And when this mapping reducibility is holding, what do you know? Because ATM is undecidable and ATM is mapping reducible to haltium, what can you say? If A is mapping reducible to and B A is undecidable, then B is undecidable. So using the corollary, if ATM is mapping reducible to haltium and ATM is already known to be undecidable, what can you say about haltium? Haltium is also undecidable. So this is another way of proving it. right? Is it clear? Questions? Is there any question? That's a very good question, Dhruv. What do you think? Let's try doing that. Let's try doing that. So Dhruv is saying that at this step particularly, at this step, at place of going in loop, just say reject, right? Let's try doing that. I think that will give us a very good, clear understanding. So suppose that step that we have written here, it is not enter. If you change this step into reject, what will be the effect of this? Let's see. If you convert that, then what is going to happen? Let's say that this MW is part of ATM. What does it mean? It means that M accepts W, right? And when M accepts W, what does it mean? M is actually, M dash also accepts W. And then it means that if you take M dash W, it belongs to Haltium. Right? One direction. Let's take the second step. You are saying that MW doesn't belong to ATM. Now, when MW doesn't belong to ATM, there are two possibilities. Right? Let's consider here. The first possibility is that M rejects W. The other possibility is M goes in loop. Now, when M rejects W, then what is going to happen? When M rejects W, okay, first let's say M goes in loop. If M goes in loop on W, what happens? M dash also goes in loop. If M dash also goes in loop, what does it mean? That whenever you take M dash W, it is not part of Haltium. So far we are good. Because what we have to prove? We have to prove that whenever MW is part of ATM, if and only if M dash, W dash or W whatever is part of Haltium. We have to make that the function is doing like this. So far if MW was part of ATM, this function that you have created, right, that is ensuring that M dash W is part of Haltium. MW is not part of ATM, that means if it is going in loop, M dash W dash also goes in loop and it is not part of Haltium. What about this? You have to see. If M rejects W, what happens? As per the modification M rejects W, if your function for M dash doesn't go in loop but it says reject, see the effect. Here M dash says reject W. But when M dash says reject W, what can you say about this thing? M dash W halt TM. When M dash is rejecting W, M dash W, this pair will be part of Haltium or not? Tell me. It will be part of Haltium, right? So when MW is actually belonging this to ATM, sorry, it is not belonging to ATM, but what you are getting that m dash w is still part of hall tm. So is it satisfy this particular condition that you wanted to establish? Does it ensure that? You wanted to construct a function, right? You wrote a function that converts m into m dash, transforms. But after the transformation, is it ensured? It is actually not satisfying this condition. So that is why when you did that, at place of going for reject, once you say enter in a loop, what happens? When you say enter in a loop, this m rejects, this situation never arrives. When m rejects w, still it says that m dash is also going in loop. Is it clear? So when you modify that function, it is ensuring this doesn't exist altogether. And you directly go that m dash also goes in loop using this step. And based on that, you ensure that that m dash w is not part of hall tm. No, we did not created a copy of m. See, m rejects w. Yes, you are right. Actually, when you did this modification, reject, it is actually you have created a copy of m. Very good. So m dash here, when you say it reject, it is exactly the copy. You did not transformed anything. You actually took a copy of m and called it m dash. But then it is not going to really help. So that is why you have to do this necessary modification. Is it clear? Okay, good. Similarly, if you go, I will not go in detail of this, but if you try to establish, if you remember what we proved, we said that ATM is reducible to ETM, right? We tried to establish this. But when you try to really do the reduction and try to really form this function f such that it ensures that whenever your m w is part of ATM, this m dash actually belongs to ETM, right? You have to find such a function from sigma star to sigma star, and this function should be able to convert a given string, which is a pair of a machine and input, into a single machine m dash. So f should be capable of doing this, and it should be able to make sure that this relationship holds, right? Okay. But once you go and try to see, actually the construction is not this. In reality, we prove that ATM is reducible to not ETM but ETM complement. And this is what is there. So you should go back and try to read the construction and how you are constructing MW. If you remember the construction of the machine M1 we were constructing, that was doing what? It was rejecting everything, but only on W it was running. So we set the language in a way that whenever M accepts W, what was happening? Whenever W was accepting, actually the machine that you constructed, it was having something, right? It was accepting W only whenever M was accepting W. So whenever M accepts W, m dash that we constructed, it was accepting W, but then it cannot be part of ETM. It is actually part of ETM complement. But when M is not accepting W, M dash language was 5. So therefore M dash is not part of ETM. That means that M dash is actually part of ETM at that point of time, and therefore the language of M dash is 5. Okay, so try going back to understand the definition of M dash, put it there and try to see if this particular thing you are able to understand. So that is your homework to really go through it. Okay, just like we have actually got the theorem for decidable and undecidability, there are two more theorems and corollary. Let me quickly write it. So it says that if A is mapping reducible to B and B is actually Turing recognizable, right? Then A is also Turing recognizable. And the corollary of this is in the form that if A is mapping reducible to B and A is not Turing recognizable, then B is not Turing recognizable. What this theorem will help you, that if you want to prove ever that a problem is Turing recognizable, you have to first establish a relationship that there is a problem which is known to be Turing recognizable and it is mapping reducible to B. It is still the same kind of relationship. It says that B is as hard to solve as A. So if A is Turing recognizable, B will also be, if B is Turing recognizable, certainly A will be also Turing recognizable. But if A itself is not Turing recognizable, then B is also not Turing recognizable. Do you remember any language which was not Turing recognizable? Anything that you have encountered so far? Any formal language which is not even Turing recognizable? Oh, that is actually recognizable. Sorry. That is Turing recognizable. There is a recognizer given. You should go back and read. It is undecidable. Not. The problem was not. Very good, Dhruv. So, when you take ATM complement, if you remember, we proved that it is Turing recognizable. Why? Because if you remember, what was the theorem? The theorem says that if a language A and a complement both are recognizable, then A is decidable. Right? A is recognizable means A is Turing recognizable, and A complement is Turing recognizable means A is actually co-Turing recognizable. So the theorem was, if a language is Turing recognizable and co-Turing recognizable, so it is also decidable. So what we realized that ATM is actually Turing recognizable. What we understood that ATM is undecidable. So the only thing that could have gone wrong, that ATM complement is not Turing recognizable. Otherwise, if ATM complement was also Turing recognizable, then ATM would have been decidable. So certainly ATM complement is not Turing recognizable. Okay, if ATM complement is not Turing recognizable, which means what? You have given something like A is not Turing recognizable. And if you reduce this problem to another problem, what will happen? That problem will also become not Turing recognizable. So it means that whenever you prove that ATM complement is mapping reducible to a problem X, then X is also not Turing recognizable. Is it clear? If yes, then one thing you have to understand, proving that ATM complement is mapping reducible to X and proving ATM is mapping reducible to X bar. Are these two things equivalent or not? Tell me. Are these two statements equivalent? Yes. If you want to go deeper to understand what it says, this statement says that you have a function f from sigma star to sigma star such that whenever your w is part of ATM complement, if and only if fw is part of X. Right? So this if and only if relationship, if you take the complement, still it will remain same. Like you negate both side. When you negate both side, what you gonna get? You will get when W does not belong to ATM complement, if and only if FW doesn't belong to X, right? And this you can rewrite as, if W does not belong to ATM, what does it mean? That W belongs to ATM, right? If and only if FW belongs to X complement. So what does this ensures? That whenever you have a function that it ensures this, it was ensuring this one, it means that the same function that was establishing this mapping reducibility also ensures this mapping reducibility. Is it clear? Or anyone has any doubt? So the interesting part, what you can guess that if you establish that ATM complement is mapping reducible to X, what it will convey? X is not Turing recognizable. That means that whenever you establish ATM is mapping reducible to X complement, it will ensure that X is not Turing recognizable. Right? So ATM is mapping reducible to whatever the language, the complement of that is not Turing recognizable. That is the overall conclusion. Is it clear so far? So to prove that any language is not Turing recognizable, take the complement of that language and try to reduce the ATM to that particular language. If you are able to do so, you will prove that ATM is mapping reducible to the complement of that language, which will ensure that ATM complement is mapping reducible to that particular language, and which will conclude that that language is not Turing recognizable. Let us take example of one such language. You have already seen it. EQTM. EQTM was undecidable. We're going to prove that it is also not Turing recognizable, right? How are we going to do that? Okay, let's define the function f. So what this function is defined, it is defined as on input MW, which is the input for ATM, right? What you're gonna do? You're gonna define two machines. See, to establish first of all that EQTM is not Turing recognizable, what you have to prove? EQTM is not Turing recognizable. You have to prove that ATM is mapping reducible to EQTM complement. Right? To establish that, you have to find a function such that whenever MW, it is able to start whenever you have MW which is part of ATM, right? It is if and only if you have some M1 and M2 which are part of EQTM complement. Remember, complement. So you want to find a function f that actually converts this into this, right? Let's define that function. So the function takes as an input MW and it actually constructs two machines. So we're gonna construct M1 and M2. What M1 does is something very simple. On any input, you're just gonna reject. What M2 does, on any input, it says run M on W if it accepts, you also accept. And the output of this function is M1 and M2. Right? M1, M2 is the output of this function. So this function is converting, it is taking as an input MW and it is constructing M1, M2 out of it. Now you have to establish this relationship that this is ensured. So let's see. When MW is part of ATM, what does it mean? When MW is part of ATM, what does it represent? It represents that M accepts W. If M accepts W, what happens to M2? If M accepts W, whatever is the input to M2, M2 accepts everything. So when M accepts W, language of M2 is sigma star. And already you know that what is the language of M. Language of M1 is phi. Right? So when M accepts W, language of M2, as you have decided that on any input, if M is accepting W, it accepts whatever the string is given as input to M2. So the language of M2 is sigma star, while language of M1 is what? On every input it is rejecting. So language of M1 is phi. So when M accepts W, LM2 is star, LM1 is sigma, and does it say? That means L of M1 is not equals to L of M2. That means M1, M2, this tuple will belong to EQTM complement, not an EQTM. Yes or no? Because they are not equivalent, so they will be part of EQTM complement and not an EQTM. Okay, good. We are able to establish one way. Let's try to see for the other way. So if MW is not part of ATM, what does it mean? It means that M doesn't accept W. What does it mean? When M doesn't accept W, M2 is not going to accept anything because either it rejects or it goes in loop. So M2 was accepting any string or it was accepting all strings when M was accepting W. When M is not accepting W, M2 is not going to accept anything, and L of M2 will be 5, which is also the language of M1. And in that case, when LM1 is equals to LM2, what does it mean? It means both machines are equivalent, and in that case M1 M2 will not be part of EQTM complement. So we constructed a function f that ensures that whenever the input is a member of ATM, the converted output actually is also a member of EQTM complement. And when the input MW is not part of ATM, then the conversion that you have done to machines that are equivalent and they are not part of EQTM complement. So we are able to establish a function, and this function is computable, therefore this is established. And when you established ATM is equivalent, a mapping reducible to EQTM complement, what you have concluded that EQTM is not Turing recognizable. Okay, let's do the same thing for EQTM complement. If you want to prove that EQTM complement is not Turing recognizable, what you need to do? It is very similar to what we have done. Just we have to change a few things here and there. We have to establish that it is mapping reducible to now EQTM. We have to establish this. To establish this, I may go back and try to write the whole thing, or let me just suggest that what all will change. If you want to really establish that ATM is mapping reducible to EQTM, you try to write the same function as the function G. Now the input to G will be same, and you're going to construct two machines for that G. The only difference will be that on input where you are rejecting everything, you will just flip it. You're going to say that I'm going to accept for G. Right? When you did this change, what is going to happen now? You are saying that M1, what is the language of M1? At place of language of M1 as phi, now the language of M1 has become sigma star. On input, any input, it is just accepting. So what is going to happen? When MW is part of ATM, that means M accepts W, it will result into language of M2 is sigma star, and the same is the language of M1, right? Which will result that this M1, M2, these two machines are equivalent and therefore they are part of EQTM, right? Vice versa, if MW not part of ATM, that means what? M doesn't accept, which will result in L of M2 to be phi, while L of M1 is sigma star, which will result that this M1 M2, right, language of M1 is not equals to language of M2, and therefore M1 M2 will not be part of EQTM. So you again established the same relationship using the function G. So G is a new function, and it is just a small modification from F that it accepts at place of reject for M1 at this step. Now, based on G, you are able to establish that whenever MW is part of ATM, right, this is if and only if if my M1, M2 actually are part of EQTM. And this is holding based on the function G. So based on this, you have established that this is holding true, ATM is mapping reducible to EQTM, and this concludes that EQTM complement is not Turing recognizable. So finally, what is the conclusion out of this whole thing? If you remember, we were talking about this overall bubbles, right? This was the regular language, this was context-free languages. Outside that, we said that there is a recursive language. Out of that, it was recursively enumerable language, and outside that there was something else. So if you remember, your ATM was where? It was undecidable. So it was not recursive, ATM was here. And when we said ATM complement, it was here. Right? But even EQTM and EQTM complement, both are actually outside this bubble. So a language which is Turing recognizable, the complement can be, sorry, if a language is not Turing recognizable, what can you say about its complement? Is the question clear? If there is a problem A which is not Turing recognizable, what can you say about A complement? Will it be Turing recognizable or not? I think the answer to this is you just have to look at EQTM and ATM. EQTM is not Turing recognizable, EQTM complement is also not Turing recognizable. But ATM complement is not recognizable. What about ATM? ATM is Turing recognizable. So you cannot be sure. So not Turing recognizable languages are not closed under complement operation. They are not closed. So closure properties for complement is something very interesting, and you should understand it for the decidable languages, Turing recognizable languages, and also for the not Turing recognizable languages. Okay? And also for undecidable. So you should be able to understand what will be the closure property on complement operation. Is it clear? So that's all for today. Next class, we're going to jump into the complexity theory. Right? Straight away, we're going to start dealing with time, and then further we will try to see different classes related to time complexity, P, NP complete, and NP hard problems and all that. So try revising these concepts, understand the basis of reducibility, how reduction holds, and believe me, this reduction, what you're gonna learn, this is a very theoretical understanding you are gaining. But once you gain this theoretical understanding that you are converting a problem into another problem, this reduction, when you are solving a real world problem, even you are working on your some problem in your company, or if you are solving a problem which is given in competition, when you are mapping a problem to another problem, you have to make sure that every instance here is mapped to there. and the same theoretical understanding will be required there, right? So try revising this concept and understand everything in detail. Thank you so much.